We explore how guts from Berserk could learn from looking at Zweihaender and Nodachi.
This is the Kitsune-Klan, a group of sword enthusiasts who like cosplay, reenactment, and historical martial arts. If you have similar interests, feel welcomed.
We have already looked at heavy swords in pop culture and fantasy, and I mentioned that there are some real world counterparts, such as the Zweihaender, the Montante, or the Nodachi. And one of the viewers asked whether we could show something about that. And that brought my idea that, hey, for the use of heavy swords, we should look at Zweihaender, Nodachi, and Montante. Problem is that most of the props we had for the fantasy swords were not in the same size range and would not behave such as these historical weapons. Luckily, I could get another version of Guts' giant sword from Berserk that's more close to it, at least. It's still not the right size, but much better. And with this, I can use some of the mechanics that we use from Zweihaender, Nodachi, and Montante. So let's dive into it. As a first step, we can help with the foot to get the sword up, and then we already reached the first hoot from Tag, where the sword can rest on our shoulder. If we step forward, we have an Einhorn, where the sword still rests on our shoulder in the same way, but as we stepped forward, it's a different orientation of the blade. We can train that back and forth to learn the transitions between these. If we let the tip drop, but still rested on our shoulder, we reach the Hangetort, which exists in two versions, with the one foot in front or the other foot in front. Now we can get the sword onto the other shoulder, and we end up in something like the Zornhut, make a step forward, and then we are in something like the Wacht position we know already. If we get the tip up, we get into a version of the Pflug, and if we change the direction of the position, we get in a variant of Posta di Donna, which means we have now 8 type of Huten that we can use with this giant sword, and in all of these cases, the blade can rest with the flat side on our shoulder. That only works if I hold the sword in thumb hold. In normal hold, this would simply not work, because then always one of the sharp sides would rest on my shoulder. And the thumb hold is also important for cutting. We can simply swing the sword from the shoulder to the other side, but edge alignment in this type of strike can only be achieved in thumb hold. You can test it yourself. In normal hold, your backbone will need to be out of the straight position, and it will destabilize you. By the way, the entire sequence you are seeing here is a 4-minute training sequence I did. There's always a break to show the strikes then in slow motion, but you can see that all these sequences in fact are one block of permanent filming if you pay attention. If we strike back from the other shoulder, we then have, of course, as we are in thumb hold, to use the other side, the other edge of the sword. And this makes sense because it's a two-sided sword with two sharp edges, and then of course we can use these appropriately. This type of strike can not only be performed to cut through the belly, we can also cut for the head, or we can also cut for the feet. We can also make this cut diagonally down. There it is important that we straighten our arms to a certain degree and then provide an additional pulse so that the weapon does a kind of circle, so that it moves up again to our shoulder where it can rest. Otherwise we will not be able to stop this blade. And that's important with these heavy blades. We always have to get control. As we have now diagonal cuts and horizontal cuts, on the one side with a long edge, on the other side with a short edge, we can always cut from one side to the other and vary from where we cut. If we want to cut twice from the same direction, we can of course use the transitions of the different Huten that we already had. So we can make a cut, transfer the hoot onto the other side, and then cut again from the same side if this is necessary for tactical reasons. Of course, we need another type of strike as well. That's a kind of whip cut motion in combination with a master cut. So from one shoulder we throw our sword forward, at the same time pull backward, and then pull the blade to the other shoulder. By this we don't cut through, because that would not be possible with this cut, because we're using, so to say, the wrong edge, which does not allow to cut through, otherwise we disarm ourselves with this type of heavy blade. This may feel strange at first, but as soon as you are more used to it, this feels in fact very natural. Again, we can use the variation of the Huten to get from one side to the other and perform the accompanying cut that we can perform from there. The idea is here that at the point of the longest extension, we get the main force. If we combine this strike with the strikes we did before, we are able to have two cuts more or less from the same direction. If you have not seen this type of combination, I have discussed it in combination with the master cuts. Video is linked in the description box. There you can see this mechanic with a lighter sword. With this type of sword, it's very, very powerful because you can use these two strikes with the first one knocking away the weapon of your opponent and then striking from the same side to hit the target. We can now combine all these types of different strikes that we have already learned, and we can combine the changes in Huten to already perform longer flows, and with these also perform strategic attacks. It's no longer that unrealistic to move large swords if we use these mechanics, which have also been used in historical instances. The main problem, in my view, that people have with these giant swords is that they try to strike with them as if they would do classical cutting test cuts with a katana or so. They try to use the normal type of strike mechanics, not using these swords in thumb hold, and then try to stop these swords with the force of their arms. This is impossible. This will not work out. So we can make sense of these types of giant swords, or at least we can say, hey, if you have giant swords in your fantasy setting, there are mechanical solutions how you could use them, and we can even tell you how they would need to look like. Basically, they would need to look a bit like what I showed here. There are more cuts and cut combinations that you can perform with these types of giant swords, but these ones already give you an idea what is very simply possible without a lot of training your upper body to hold up these swords. Simply follow the force and the direction the sword is telling you, and then you end up with these types of combinations. This was now not too much about Zweihaender, Montante or Nodachi. This was now again more on the fantasy swords, but I have to say I really like this giant Berserk type of sword because it allows me again to train outside in public, for example in a public park, for the use of these heavy weapons without larger problems, because everybody can see that what I'm using here is a prop, or you could even consider it a toy, and this gives me simple options for training that I would otherwise not have. Therefore, I'm really thankful that there are also these versions of the Berserk sword. I would love to have one that is even larger. If you know one with a 1.80 m size or something like that, please let me know. I would be really, really interested in that. Again, I hope this video was an inspiration for you, and I hope to see you around next time.